Captain Evelyn Rourke stood at the observation deck of the Vanguard, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula that stretched across the void. The stars blinked in the distance, distant and indifferent to the fragile existence of humanity. She was a brilliant tactician, known throughout the fleet for her ability to read the battlefield and find a way where none seemed possible. Yet in this moment, Evelyn couldn't silence the nagging doubt that had plagued her for months. Humanity, for all its progress, still felt like an infant among titans. Earth had risen to a golden age of technology, but in the grand scheme of the galaxy, it was little more than a speck of dust. And the Jora, mysterious, powerful, and indifferent, had only cemented that reality. The weight of command pressed against her chest, heavier than any burden she'd ever carried. Her crew depended on her, but how could she lead them when she wasn't sure of the path herself? She clenched her fists, eyes narrowing. No one could see the cracks in her armor, but they were there, just beneath the surface, waiting for a weakness to be exposed. Earth had made strides in colonizing the stars, carving out small pockets of human civilization on distant planets. Cities had blossomed on Mars, Europa, and even the rugged moons of Titan. But for every human foothold, there were countless alien species, more advanced, more powerful, and more ancient. Humanity had learned to live in the shadow of these galactic giants, holding its breath every time an unfamiliar ship entered the solar system, praying it wasn't a Jora scout. Despite Earth's technological advancements, it was a pale reflection of the mighty empires that had been dominating the galaxy for millennia. The Jora in particular stood as an impenetrable wall. Their ships, cloaked in near-invincible armor, moved with a cold, calculating precision. Their culture was as old as the stars themselves, and their arrogance, a byproduct of untold centuries of dominance, permeated everything they did. Humanity, despite its rapid growth, was still a fledgling player in a galaxy that had long since established its power dynamics. The fragile peace Earth had managed to carve out was always on the edge of collapse, like a ship afloat in a vast ocean of unknowns, constantly drifting toward unseen dangers. At the farthest reaches of human space, the Vanguard drifted in orbit, above a barren, lifeless moon. It was more than just a warship. It was humanity's last line of defense against the vast unknown. Commissioned in response to the Jora's growing presence in the galaxy, the Vanguard was humanity's answer to the existential threat they represented. It was equipped with the latest in human military technology, enhanced energy shields, cutting-edge railguns, and cloaking devices designed to help it slip undetected into hostile territory. It was the pride of Earth's fleet, a ship that could hold the line against the Jora for as long as necessary. Captain Rourke's command of the Vanguard was seen as a necessary but difficult position. She had the respect of her crew, but that respect came with a price. They knew what she carried, the pressure of knowing that if the Vanguard fell, humanity's chances of survival would plummet. The Jora's power was unmatched, and humanity's technological advancements, though impressive, still paled in comparison to the ancient empire's might. But Evelyn would not back down. She couldn't afford to. The Jora were a race of beings whose very presence seemed to warp the fabric of reality around them. Their empire had been established long before humanity even dreamed of space travel, a cold, vast dominion spanning hundreds of star systems. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their ships nearly invulnerable, their weapons capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single strike. Their forces moved with a terrifying efficiency, and their culture was one built on superiority. For centuries, the Jora had watched humanity from afar, dismissing Earth and its people as nothing, more than a passing curiosity, an insignificant species barely worth noticing. They saw no threat in humanity's growing technological prowess, dismissing it as primitive. But that was the Jora's fatal mistake. They underestimated the one thing they couldn't predict: human resilience. To the Jora, emotions were a weakness, chaos within the controlled universe they sought to impose. But humanity thrived on unpredictability, on ingenuity born of necessity. The Jora never imagined that a species so young and so fragile could hold the line. Against them, let alone defeat them. Their first mistake would prove to be humanity's advantage. The sirens blared throughout the vanguard, cutting through the sterile hum of the command deck. Evelyn's face hardened as she scanned the incoming report. Jora forces had attacked one of humanity's frontier colonies, and the devastation was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The colony, once a thriving community of settlers, was now reduced to smoldering ruins. The Jora had made their demand, humanity's immediate surrender. The galaxy watched, and the stakes had never been higher. This was not just a test of humanity's strength. It was a challenge to their very survival. Evelyn received the mission with a grave sense of purpose. Her crew was already assembling, ready to embark on the most dangerous mission of their lives. The vanguard was preparing for a strike on the Jora fleet, and though their chances were slim, Evelyn knew there was no turning back. She looked out over the cold expanse of space, feeling the weight of the galaxy's gaze upon her. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "No more running. We fight." The decision had been made, and with it, the first sparks of humanity's resistance were ignited. The Jora were not a species that believed in mercy. Their empire had existed for millennia, spanning galaxies, conquering civilizations, and leaving nothing but dust in their wake. Their ships were not like the human-made vessels of the vanguard. They were organic, living machines that pulsed with a terrifying, otherworldly energy. Each ship was an extension of the Jora themselves, its hull made from a rare, bioengineered material that absorbed and refracted energy in ways humans couldn't even begin to comprehend. Their weapons were equally destructive. Energy beams that could strip entire planets of their atmosphere, bioplagues capable of reducing entire populations to mindless husks, and a network of psychic overlords that allowed them to communicate across vast distances, coordinating with flawless precision. The Jora military tactics were an art form in efficiency, swift, calculated, and without mercy. In comparison, humanity's weapons were crude, blunt tools, railguns that could barely pierce Jora shields, fighters made of metal and plastic, that could never hope to match the Jora's speed or maneuverability. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Jora was their arrogance. They considered themselves the peak of evolution, the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Human life was beneath their notice. To the Jora, Earth was a mere curiosity, a species to be crushed underfoot if it became too bothersome. And yet, in their conquest for domination, they had underestimated one thing: the will of humanity. When the Jora struck, humanity wasn't ready. The first reports of the attack came in as whispers, and by the time the world realized the full extent of the assault, it was too late. The Jora had descended upon a frontier colony, a place where humans had begun to carve out new lives on, a distant planet. Within hours, the colony was reduced to rubble, its inhabitants wiped out by an enemy that didn't even need to break a sweat. The news spread quickly, as did the fear. People on Earth, in the colonies, and aboard ships like the Vanguard could only watch helplessly as the Jora moved deeper into human space. The military scrambled to form a defense, but their response was slow, and their resources were stretched thin. The realization hit like a slap in the face. Humanity was a small, fragile species in a galaxy full of predators, and the Jora were one of the biggest. Evelyn Rourke stood in the command center of the Vanguard, her eyes glued to the holographic display. She could hear the growing panic in her crew's voices. The Jora ships, sleek and deadly, moved with an almost poetic efficiency as they tore through the colony's defenses. Her own ship, the pride of human engineering, felt like a toy in comparison. "We can't win this," one of her officers muttered, barely above a whisper. Evelyn's fists clenched at her sides. She couldn't let that thought take root. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity was outmatched, outgunned, and it was all too clear that they were fighting a losing battle. While the Jora laid waste to the human colony, the rest of the galaxy watched with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and opportunism. For some species like the Qatar, the vulturous, warlike alien race with a penchant for scavenging, the destruction of humanity was nothing short of a chance for expansion. They saw Earth's vulnerability as an opening for themselves, an opportunity. to move in and take whatever resources the humans had left. Others, like the Veldari, a highly intelligent race of diplomats and scholars, viewed the conflict with quiet horror. They had long avoided direct confrontation with the Jora, opting instead for subtle alliances and negotiations. The Veldari were no strangers to war, but the Jora's efficiency and brutality made them seem hopelessly outmatched. Still, the Veldari remained neutral for now, content to wait and observe as the fate of humanity unfolded. Then there were the Quivans, a peaceful, highly spiritual species who believed in the power of cooperation across all races. They had always believed that humanity, despite their weaknesses, held potential. The Quivans' leaders had sent quiet messages of support, pledging to do what they could to assist the humans in their struggle, though they feared the wrath of the Zora would be too great for any outside intervention to be effective. The galaxy was in a tense holding pattern. Would humanity be crushed under the heel of the Jora, or would they find some way to fight back, to defy the odds? For now, all the galaxy could do was watch and wait. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans did what they did best: they fought back. In the wake of the Jora attack on the colony, stories began to trickle in from scattered outposts and resistance cells. Small, desperate acts of defiance that ignited hope in the hearts of those who had begun to despair. On the planet Verdant, a ragtag group of human settlers had staged a hit-and-run attack against a Jora supply convoy, using nothing but improvised explosives and ancient, outdated weapons. Their success was minimal: a few Jora drones disabled, a couple of supply crates taken, but the message was clear. Humanity was not as easily cowed as the Jora had assumed. In the asteroid belt, another group of human miners had launched a guerrilla attack against a Jora scouting vessel. The battle was short-lived, but the humans' use of decoy tactics and ambushes proved that they could hold their own, even if just for a moment. Back aboard the Vanguard, Evelyn watched the reports trickle in, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and disbelief. Against a foe that could wipe out entire civilizations without breaking a sweat, humanity was fighting with everything they had. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. And that resilience, that refusal to accept defeat, might just be what tipped the balance. As the captain, Evelyn was expected to lead her crew through this nightmare. But she could feel the weight of doubt pulling at her. Her crew was scared, and so was she. They had trained for every scenario, every possible enemy, but nothing could have prepared them for the Jora. "What if we can't do it, Captain?" Lieutenant Briggs asked, his voice wavering. "What if they're too strong?" Evelyn's throat tightened. The question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. They were all thinking it. What if humanity was never meant to survive in the galaxy's brutal system? What if they were destined to fall? But Evelyn knew that if she showed even the slightest hint of doubt, the crew would crumble. She took a deep breath, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "We don't give up. Not today. Not ever. We're human, and we fight for our survival. We've done it before and we'll do it again. Do you understand?" There was a pause before Briggs nodded, his expression hardened with resolve. The others followed suit, one by one. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to prove that humanity's will could not be so easily extinguished. The alarm sounded across the deck as the Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace, coming face to face with the Jora fleet. The tension in the air was suffocating. Their ships, massive and imposing, loomed in the distance like gods ready to strike down a mere mortal. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she studied the readings. This was it, the first direct confrontation with the Jora. The battle began with a flash, a surge of energy that rattled the entire ship. The Jora didn't waste time. They unleashed their devastating firepower, and the Vanguard was forced into a desperate evasive maneuver. But the humans wouldn't back down. Not yet. The Jora didn't waste time. The first strike was only the beginning. As the Vanguard limped back to Earth's orbit, their shields battered, their engines strained, the message from the Jora was clear. Humanity was not just a nuisance to be wiped out quickly. They were to be broken, crushed and left as a warning to any other species who dared to challenge the Empire. The Zora launched their retaliation with terrifying precision. Entire fleets descended upon Earth's outer colonies, their ships sending shockwaves across the system as they tore apart human defenses. The capital world of Cinder, once a beacon of human achievement and colonization, had been reduced to rubble in hours. In mere days, the Zora had taken out half of humanity's most strategic colonies, each blow more devastating than the last. No one was spared. The humans, already at a disadvantage, scrambled to rebuild, to regroup, but it was clear. Earth's colonies were facing annihilation. Panic began to spread among the remaining systems. The colonies, once symbols of human ingenuity and exploration, were now mere pieces on a galactic chessboard, their survival a question of when, not if. Evelyn's hands shook as she watched the reports flood in. Fleet after fleet was lost, systems were decimated, and human resistance was rapidly crumbling. She knew that no amount of training or tactics would save them now, only something more, something human could. And yet there was little time for reflection. The battle was far from over. "Captain," Maya Chen said, her voice breaking through Evelyn's thoughts, "the Zora are moving toward Earth. We need a plan, now." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, every decision becoming more dire. The war was escalating, and Earth was next. The weight of command was beginning to suffocate Evelyn. It was one thing to lead during training drills, in simulations, where victory was certain and sacrifices were calculated. It was another to lead when entire civilizations were on the line, when every decision could mean the lives of millions. The latest intelligence report had given Evelyn a chilling choice. One of the remaining human colonies was in the direct path of the Zora. If the Zora reached it, it would fall. There was no question. But there was also a window of opportunity, an opening in the enemy fleet's line. If Evelyn were to sacrifice that colony, to lure the Zora into a trap by using it as bait, the Vanguard and its crew could strike a devastating blow. The decision wasn't just tactical, it was moral. Could Evelyn sacrifice a civilian population, people who had no way of fighting back, to save the rest of humanity? Could she willingly become the architect of their destruction, for the possibility of a greater victory? She had always considered herself a protector, a leader who safeguarded her people. The thought of using them as pawns sickened her. The debate raged inside her, every scenario unfolding in her mind like a series of horrific visions. What kind of leader does that make me, she wondered. What kind of person? I'll need a decision. Captain, Maya's voice cut through her internal turmoil. The window is closing. Evelyn turned her gaze to the star maps. Time was slipping away. Her thoughts flashed back to her father, who had once taught her that sometimes the only way to win was to make the tough calls, the ones that left no room for hesitation. He was a soldier, not a leader, but his words echoed now in her mind. If humanity was to survive, she might have to become something she wasn't ready to be. But the weight of every life on her shoulders was real. With a deep breath, Evelyn made the decision. We take the risk. We protect Earth at all costs. Get the fleet ready. In the heart of the Vanguard, the crew fought back against impossible odds. The Zora had already shown how lethal they were, their ships effortlessly tearing through human defenses. But the humans weren't going down without a fight. The fight was no longer about winning. It was about surviving, about finding a way to push back against an enemy that seemed invincible. Chief Engineer Jason Rios was a genius, the kind of person who saw solutions where others saw only problems. His mind was constantly working, searching for ways to outmaneuver the Zora with the limited resources they had. They didn't have the luxury of building new weapons. They had to make do with whatever they could find. We're repurposing the colony's old drone network, Rios said, his voice calm but urgent. We can use them to get inside the Zora fleet's formation, make it seem like a false attack. If we can get them to split their forces, we stand a chance. Evelyn's gaze hardened. They had to be quick, and they had to be clever. No one would ever accuse humanity of having the most advanced technology. But what they lacked in raw power they made up for with ingenuity. The crew worked around the clock, adjusting systems, recalibrating the ship's weapons to fire in unconventional ways, and even using hacked Jora tech to turn their own weapons against them. The Jora would expect a direct assault, Evelyn knew, but that was the trap. They weren't going to give them the satisfaction of playing by their rules. As the modified drone swarms launched into the void, the tension on the Vanguard grew unbearable. Every move, every second of delay, brought them closer to being overwhelmed, but the humans weren't backing down. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," Evelyn said, voice steely with determination. "They may have the numbers, but we have the brains." Her words were a call to arms. The crew was ready to give it everything they had. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the Jora that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. In the chaos of the ongoing war, it wasn't just Evelyn who stepped up to fight. The crew of the Vanguard was a patchwork of individuals, each with their own unique strengths and experiences, but all united by one goal: survival. Lieutenant Maya Chen was a rising star in the human fleet, her reputation built on courage and conviction. Despite the Jora's overwhelming technological superiority, she had never once faltered in the face of danger. Her leadership in the tactical planning room was invaluable, and her ability to inspire the crew to hold on to hope, even in the darkest moments, was critical. "Maya, I need you to coordinate the fleet," Evelyn said, pacing in front of the command table. "I can't do this alone. They'll need your guidance to make this work." Maya nodded, determination written across her face. "We've faced worse. We'll survive this too." Then there was Rios, the unsung hero of the Vanguard. Jason had never wanted to be a soldier, but when Earth's survival depended on him, he rose to the occasion. His knack for improvising solutions was keeping the Vanguard afloat. More than that, his ability to think outside the box was a beacon of hope in a war that felt like it was already lost. "You've got something to work with," Rios said, wiping sweat from his brow as he finalized the drone reprogramming. "It might not be perfect, but we're making it work. We always make it work." In every corner of the Vanguard there were others like them, brave men and women whose courage and ingenuity formed the backbone of humanity's resistance. The true strength of the ship wasn't in its technology, it was in the hearts and minds of the people aboard it. And with every passing hour, Evelyn saw them becoming something more, a force that the Jora couldn't ignore. The captain of the Vanguard had never been this woman. The woman who would sacrifice millions of civilians for the chance to strike back. The woman who was forced to make decisions that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Evelyn had been a reluctant leader, thrust into command by circumstance, not by choice. She had always questioned her ability, her right to lead, but in the face of this galactic crisis, she was forced to grow. The weight of command sat heavily on her shoulders, but Evelyn began to realize that it was her responsibility not just to fight, but to give her crew the strength to continue. The self-doubt that had once paralyzed her now fueled her actions. She was not just a captain, she was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for her crew to rally around even when all seemed lost. "I'm not just leading a ship," Evelyn whispered to herself as she stood before the holographic star maps. "I'm leading a fight for humanity." With every decision she made, with every loss and victory, Evelyn found herself becoming the leader she had never imagined she could be. No longer a reluctant commander, but a defiant symbol of human resolve. Her transformation was the quiet strength that held the Vanguard together, humanity's last hope against the cold, calculating Jora. The Jora were a fearsome race. Their ships were invincible, their tactics ruthlessly efficient, and their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed. But for all their advantages, they had one glaring vulnerability: their inability to comprehend the unpredictable, chaotic nature of human thought. Evelyn stood on the command deck of the Vanguard, staring at the holoscreen in front of her, displaying a fragmented Jora communication intercepted during the last battle. Her mind raced as she sifted through the data, trying to make sense of it. There had been a pattern in their movements, in their reactions, something off. Maya, Chen was the first to break the silence. Captain, I don't understand. They've anticipated every move we've made so far. How do we beat them? Evelyn paused, her gaze fixed on the screen. It's not about anticipating us, she muttered, under her breath. It's about understanding us. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. The Zhora were advanced in every conceivable way, except one. They couldn't grasp the chaos of human behavior. They couldn't fathom that humans could think in ways that didn't follow strict logic, that could break patterns in unpredictable ways. This was their weakness, their blind spot. The Zhora, for all their power, relied on predictability, on order, on perfection, and humanity thrived in chaos. Maya frowned, still processing. So you're saying they can't predict us? Then there was Rios, the unsung hero of the vanguard. Jason had never wanted to be a soldier, but when Earth's survival depended on him, he rose to the occasion. His knack for improvising solutions was keeping the vanguard afloat. More than that, his ability to think outside the box was a beacon of hope in a war that felt like it was already lost. You've got something to work with, Rios said, wiping sweat from his brow as he finalized the drone reprogramming. It might not be perfect, but we're making it work. We always make it work. In every corner of the vanguard there were others like them, brave men and women whose courage and ingenuity formed the backbone of humanity's resistance. The true strength of the ship wasn't in its technology, it was in the hearts and minds of the people aboard it. And with every passing hour, Evelyn saw them becoming something more, a force that the Zhora couldn't ignore. The captain of the vanguard had never been this woman. The woman who would sacrifice millions of civilians for the chance to strike back. The woman who was forced to make decisions that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Evelyn had been a reluctant leader, thrust into command by circumstance, not by choice. She had always questioned her ability, her right to lead, but in the face of this galactic crisis she was forced to grow. The weight of command sat heavily on her shoulders, but Evelyn began to realize that it was her responsibility not just to fight, but to give her crew the strength to continue. The self-doubt that had once paralyzed her now fueled her actions. She was not just a captain, she was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for her crew to rally around even when all seemed lost. I'm not just leading a ship, Evelyn whispered to herself as she stood before the holographic star maps. I'm leading a fight for humanity. With every decision she made, with every loss and victory, Evelyn found herself becoming the leader she had never imagined she could be. No longer a reluctant commander, but a defiant symbol of human resolve. Her transformation was the quiet strength that held the vanguard together, humanity's last hope against the cold, calculating Zhora. The Zhora were a fearsome race. Their ships were invincible, their tactics ruthlessly efficient, and their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed. But for all their advantages, they had one glaring vulnerability: their inability to comprehend the unpredictable, chaotic nature of human thought. Evelyn stood on the command deck of the vanguard, staring at the holoscreen in front of her, displaying a fragmented Zhora communication intercepted during the last battle. Her mind raced as she sifted through the data, trying to make sense of it. There had been a pattern in their movements, in their reactions, something off. Maya, Chen was the first to break the silence. Captain, I don't understand. They've anticipated every move we've made so far. How do we beat them? Evelyn paused, her gaze fixed on the screen. It's not about anticipating us, she muttered, under her breath. It's about understanding us. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. The Zhora were advanced in every conceivable way, except one. They couldn't grasp the chaos of human behavior. They couldn't fathom that humans could think in ways that didn't follow strict logic, that could break patterns in unpredictable ways. This was their weakness, their blind spot. The Zhora, for all their power, relied on predictability, on order, on perfection, and humanity thrived in chaos. Maya frowned, still processing. So you're saying they can't predict us? Evelyn nodded, her mind already spinning the implications. Exactly. We're not like them. We don't operate in perfect patterns. We adapt. We break the rules, and that's how we beat them. It wasn't enough to outgun them. It wasn't enough to match their technology or tactics. The key to defeating the Zora lay in exploiting their complete inability to predict and adapt to human irrationality. The Zora could not understand the human heart, our refusal to surrender, our resilience, our ingenuity in the face of the impossible. Prepare the fleet. It's time we show the Zora just how unpredictable humanity can be, Evelyn said, her voice gaining strength. The room was thick with tension as Evelyn and her senior officers gathered around the table. The holographic star maps flickered above, showing the advancing Zora fleet closing in on Earth. The timeline was terrifyingly short, but for once, the humans had a plan, and it was as unconventional as their nature. We can't win this war in a conventional way, Jason Rios said, his voice steady. But the weight of what they were about to undertake was evident in his eyes. We don't have the ships or the firepower to fight them directly. Evelyn leaned forward, her fingers tapping the table as she listened intently. They had to cripple the Zora's flagship, their command vessel. If they could break their leadership, the Zora would be thrown into disarray, unable to coordinate their forces. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. What we need, Maya added, is a way to get in close without them noticing. Their defenses are designed to detect large ships to intercept conventional attack patterns. If we play by their rules, we lose. Evelyn glanced at the crew, feeling the weight of their trust in her. The Zora didn't just threaten humanity's survival, they threatened everything. The colonies, the dreams of a united human race among the stars. It would all be reduced to nothing if they failed. Jason, Evelyn said, her eyes hardening with resolve. We need to use everything we've learned. Our unpredictability is our greatest weapon. Can you make it work? Rios met her gaze. It'll take everything we've got. We'll need to reprogram the drones, hack into their command network, and launch a full assault using the Zora's own technology against them. Maya's fingers danced across her console. We'll need to fly blind, no communication. If the Zora catch on, we're done. Evelyn nodded grimly. We do it, or we die trying. Prepare the crew. This is the only chance we have. The room fell silent. The magnitude of the mission loomed over them, but there was no going back. They were humanity's last hope, and if they didn't take this risk, Earth would fall. The plan was as audacious as it was insane. The crew of the Vanguard had worked through the night, tirelessly reprogramming their ship systems, hacking into Zora technology, and testing the drone swarms that would be the key to their survival. Jason Rios paced the engine room, sweat pouring down his face as he stared at the schematics. This is the last of the spare parts. We've got maybe 2 shots at this, and we need to make them count. Evelyn stood beside him, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to fail. Not now. The Zora had grown arrogant, overconfident, but that was their fatal flaw. They underestimated humanity. They didn't understand what made humans tick, what drove them to survive against impossible odds. The plan hinged on the Vanguard getting close enough to the Zora flagship to infiltrate their defenses. Once inside, they would use the reprogrammed drones to hack into the Zora's command system and cripple their fleet from within. But it wasn't just about technology. It was about improvisation, something the Zora had never accounted for. We'll need to fight the Zora on their own terms and then break all their rules, Evelyn said, her voice steady but full of purpose. They think we'll follow the same patterns they expect from every other species. We won't. Maya stood beside her, focused. If we can breach their defenses, we can cause enough chaos to get in close and deliver the final blow. It's risky, but it's the only chance. Rios paused, locking eyes with Evelyn. We're pushing the ship's systems beyond anything we've ever tested. If something goes wrong, Evelyn cut him off, her expression hardening. It won't. It can't. With that, they initiated the operation. The crew scrambled to their posts, the air thick with tension. Every action, every decision was a step closer to either victory or certain death. But they were ready, and they would fight with everything they had. The plan had been set into motion, and the crew of the Vanguard worked tirelessly, pushing their ship beyond its limits. But as the final moments approached, Evelyn knew what had to be done. It wasn't enough for them to just infiltrate the Jora flagship. They had to make sure it was destroyed no matter the cost. She stood alone in the command center, staring at the fleet formation, watching as the final assault unfolded on her screen. Her crew had done everything they could. Now it was her turn to lead them into the heart of the storm. "We're going to take the fight straight to them," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. "If we don't destroy the flagship, it doesn't matter what we do. We'll never win. The Vanguard is the only ship that can make it inside." Maya's face was a mask of determination. "Evelyn, you can't. I'm the captain," Evelyn said quietly. "And I'm the one who has to make the call." Her decision was a heavy one. It meant she would sacrifice herself and the ship, everything they had fought for. But she knew it was the only way to turn the tide. The Jora had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now they would see just how far the human spirit could go when faced with extinction. Evelyn activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, knowing that her crew would have to abandon ship to escape. She wouldn't ask them to follow her into the fire. They had to survive. But she would be the one to make sure the Jora paid the price. "I'll see you all on the other side," Evelyn said, her voice steady as she turned to face her crew. "Make sure Earth survives." With one final decisive action, she set the course for the Jora flagship. The countdown began. The final battle was everything humanity had feared and hoped for. The Jora fleet was massive, their ships overwhelming in number and firepower. But humanity had something they didn't: the will to fight, to win, and to survive. The drones, now reprogrammed with the Jora's own codes, surged forward in a chaotic, unpredictable pattern, throwing off the enemy's targeting systems. For the first time, the Jora were forced to react, to adapt, to their own game being played against them. The human forces capitalized on the confusion, striking with precision, causing irreparable damage to the Jora fleet. In the heart of the chaos, the Vanguard flew toward the flagship, its engines straining under the pressure. The self-destruct was set, and Evelyn held her breath. With every second, the tension grew unbearable. Would the plan work? Would they make it? As the Vanguard broke through the flagship's outer defenses, Evelyn pushed the ship forward, the crew working in unison to disable the remaining Jora systems. Just as the flagship's core reactor came into view, she gave the order. The ship's core exploded in a brilliant flash, the shockwave rippling across the battlefield. The Jora were forced to retreat. But the cost had been immense. The Vanguard was lost, its crew scattered, and Evelyn had sacrificed herself for the greater good. But the war was far from over. Humanity had struck a decisive blow, but the Jora would return. They always did. And when they did, humanity would be ready. The victory over the Jora was hard won, but it came at a cost that weighed heavily on the survivors. The once thriving human colonies now stood as hollow reminders of what had been lost in the war. Earth, though spared from annihilation, bore scars that would never fade. The people who returned from the final battle were hailed as heroes, but none of them felt victorious. Evelyn stood at the memorial on Earth's capital, surrounded by the names of those who had perished. The faces of her crew, Maya, Jason, and the others, flashed before her eyes. Their sacrifice was imprinted on her heart, as was the unspoken truth that no matter what they had accomplished, their victory had cost them more than they could have ever imagined. Maya had been one of the first to return, a survivor, but her eyes were empty, as though something within her had been lost forever. Jason had spent weeks repairing what was left of the Vanguard before breaking down. The human spirit had been shattered, but it had not been crushed, not entirely. What does victory mean when you're the last one standing? Evelyn had asked herself countless times. The thought had haunted her. The war was over. But Earth's future felt more uncertain than ever. The Jora may have been defeated for now, but the toll of the war was staggering. No one was untouched. No one was the same. Maya had said it best one night in a quiet conversation. We won, but we lost too much. The families, the friends, the colonies, and they're gone. How do you go back from that? And yet, the survivors carried on. The war had forged new leaders, and while many grieved, they also knew that humanity's defiance had forged its place in the stars. No one would ever underestimate humanity again. They had taken on the might of an empire that had decimated species far older and more advanced than theirs, and survived. But the price was steep, and, as Evelyn looked at the names of the fallen etched into the wall before her, she couldn't shake the question. Was it worth it? Evelyn sat in the quiet of her quarters, staring out at the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Earth had emerged from the war battered, but unbroken. The colonies that had survived began to rebuild, but Evelyn knew the damage would take generations to undo. She had witnessed firsthand the raw strength and resilience of humanity, but also its fragility. What now? She whispered to herself. What does this victory mean for Earth, for humanity? The war had proven one thing above all: humanity's ability to adapt, to improvise, to outthink their enemies. They had done what no one had expected, taking down a seemingly invincible foe. And yet, as she looked to the future, Evelyn felt a deep unease. The Jora were not the only threat out there. There were other forces in the galaxy, waiting, watching, studying humanity. Their actions during the war had already begun to stir the interest of alien species. But were they allies or future adversaries? Evelyn's thoughts turned inward. She had become a leader, but at what cost? So many had followed her into battle, trusted her with their lives, but the scars of the war would never fade. She had led humanity to victory, but the path ahead was uncertain. The question lingered in her mind. Could humanity, so deeply fractured by the war, find a way to rebuild not just Earth, but their very place in the galaxy? The future, for all its possibilities, felt like a vast, uncharted void. But one thing was certain: humanity's spirit would not be extinguished. The war had changed them, but it had also proven that they could survive and thrive against all odds. The galaxy had watched the war unfold, and it had not gone unnoticed. The Jora had once been the unstoppable force, a brutal empire that crushed civilizations with ease. Now, they had been forced to retreat, their flagship shattered by human ingenuity and sheer will. The Jora may have retreated, but they would not forget. In the wake of the conflict, a new reality was emerging across the galaxy. Alien species, once content to remain neutral or even passive in the face of humanity's expansion, began to take notice. Earth, once seen as a backwater planet, had become a symbol of defiance. The humans who had fought in the war were revered and feared. Their ingenuity, their unpredictability, had shattered the Jora's dominance, and now the galaxy was uncertain of what to make of them. Humanity's reputation had changed. No longer dismissed as primitive or easily intimidated, humans had earned a place in galactic history. There was respect for their resilience, but also fear. After all, they had just taken on an empire that had crushed every species in its path. What would stop them from doing the same to other alien races in the future? Diplomatic delegations arrived from various factions, some eager to explore alliances, others wary of the growing human influence. The once certain power structures of the galaxy were in flux, as every species now had to consider humanity's place within them. Was Earth an ally, or would it be a new power to reckon with? What would the humans demand next? In the corridors of the Galactic Council chambers, whispers grew louder. The future of humanity had begun, but its path was still unclear. The galaxy had breathed a collective sigh of relief after the Jora's retreat, but humanity's victory was far from the end of the story. There were murmurs of something far worse lying in wait, something beyond even the Jora's destructive force. As the humans began to rebuild, gathering their forces and looking to their future, news filtered in from the farthest reaches of space, whispers of a Jora faction. that had escaped the final blow. This faction was different. They were said to be working with an ancient, forgotten power, something even the Zora's greatest warriors feared. The rumors spoke of a force older than the Zora Empire itself, something that could rewrite the balance of power across the galaxy. The humans had shattered one enemy, but would they be ready for the darkness rising from the ashes of their victory? Was this new threat the true force behind the Zora's domination? Or was it something even more terrifying? And as the whispers grew louder, one thing became certain: humanity's fight was far from over. This was only the beginning of a new and terrifying chapter. On a remote, desolate planet, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy's established powers, a discovery had been made, one that would change the fate of humanity once again. Evelyn and her crew were briefed on a strange signal originating from the planet, a faint beacon that seemed out of place among the stars. They had heard the rumors, an artifact, one of immense power, a relic of a civilization long lost. The Zora had known of it, had feared it, but humanity had yet to understand what it was or what it could do. When the crew arrived at the planet, they found more than just remnants of an ancient civilization. They discovered a hidden vault, buried beneath the sands, with strange technology inscribed in a language no one could decipher. The artifact lay within, pulsing with an energy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was said to hold the power to shift the balance of the galaxy, possibly to create life, to destroy worlds, or to alter the very fabric of reality itself. No one knew for sure, but Evelyn knew one thing: they could not leave it behind. The artifact was their next challenge. As Evelyn's crew prepared for the uncertain future, one thing was clear: humanity was no longer fighting to survive. It was fighting for control of the universe, and whatever power the artifact held, they would face it together.